The US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has become, on paper, the most consequential foreign policy voice in the Trump administration after he was asked to additionally take on the role of National Security Advisor. He's replacing Mike Waltz, who was asked to step aside a month after he mistakenly added a journalist to a sensitive group chat. The US Vice President J.D. Vance told Fox News Mr. Waltz was not sacked, but has been moved on to be UN ambassador, where it's thought he'll do a better job.
That in the interim, Secretary of State Marco Rubio will serve as National Security Advisor while continuing his strong leadership at the State Department. Do you know how long he's going to be serving in both roles?
It is clear that I just heard this from you. As I know Secretary Rubio, this is a man who, as I think you all know, has worn several hats from day one in managing the nature of what's happened here at the State Department, at USAID, he's someone who is well known by the President. The President makes perfect assessments about who would implement his agenda, and in this case, he's chosen certainly the Secretary and Mr. Waltz to facilitate his agenda moving forward.
Thanks as well to the great people that are here. Pete Hegseth, who's doing a fantastic job. Pete, thank you. Marco Rubio, unbelievable. Unbelievable, Marco. When I have a problem, I call up Marco. He gets this solved.
The Trump security team is a hot mess. And the one who should go is not the fall guy, Michael Waltz. It is the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, who is responsible. He should be held accountable. He should be fired right now.
Donald Trump has a history of dismissing people rather quickly if they don't meet his expectation. On the case of Mike and Signalgate and all of that, it was a pretty big breach. It was a pretty big problem, and I personally, I think he owned up to it, which is noble to begin with, and took full quote responsibility. That doesn't mean he admitted it was his fault, but he takes full responsibility.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line from Chicago by the Republican strategist and chair of Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson. Great to see you, Greg, in your home turf, I might add. So a demotion or a dismissal, and is it one that can be blamed on the Signal chat scandal?
Charles, tough question. Initially, I thought it would be the Signal scandal from, a month or so ago. And I thought, someone at some point would have to take the fall for that. But then, we listened to the vice president's comments yesterday. And, I don't think you would fire someone and then put them in a position that requires Senate confirmation, which is being ambassador to the UN. So, it's a little confusing. As you know, President Trump is not afraid to fire people. But on the other hand, he's done a little, a reorganization, let's say, and just moving some of the chess pieces around and keeping Mike in a position where he can represent the United States in the UN and hopefully try to reform the UN, if anything. But I think it's, ultimately, I think someone had to go. You heard the comment from the Democrat that he wishes it was Blumenthal. He wishes it was Hegseth, Pete Hegseth, but the Secretary of Defense. But that's because the left particularly hates Pete Hegseth. He was a Fox News presenter. He's very conservative. He's really turning around the Department of Defense. Recruiting, especially in the Army, but military recruiting overall is at 40-year highs. So far, so good, in spite of the fact that the Democrats and much of the progressive media in the U.S. really dislike Pete Hegseth. That's not a reason to fire him, though, and I'm glad that the president stuck with him.
Well, Greg, there's also talk of President Trump in this move and some others potentially being under pressure from some right-wing activists and influencers who particularly have his ear. Do you think that is the case? If so, how telling is it that Mr. Trump makes major decisions based on people like that?
Well, I think the president likes to listen to the people. That's one of the reasons he won the election so comfortably, is he's got his finger on the pulse of of what American voters are thinking and what their concerns are. And so the president's pretty good at listening to a lot of different opinions. And you even saw that on the Signal chat, that there were differing opinions. That's good. Robust argument, robust discussion within the administration, I think, is healthy. And the president tends to listen to his cabinet, to his people, as well as to the voters. So that didn't really shock me at all.
Marco Rubio, who we're told started off a bit rocky after falling out with Elon Musk, appears to have somehow deepened his relationship with President Trump, which is why he's now got several jobs rather than the one he started off with. I mean, which I guess some US news outlets are suggesting might be a record within the US government. I mean, I'm not sure whether that's the case or not.
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, it's temporary in nature. I don't think he'll be permanent in that position permanently running the National Security Agency. But there's no doubt that Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, has got a larger portfolio than a typical Secretary of State. He's very popular. He's done a great job so far. And so I think he's emerged as the leading voice, as you said in the prelude, the leading voice on foreign policy issues, national security and defense. And then, of course, you have the Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, who's really emerged as the leader of the economic team. And you don't hear much from the other economic team leaders. So I think that's, yes, Marco Rubio and Scott Bessent have really emerged. And the other thing with Marco is, remember, he was confirmed unanimously in the Senate. I mean, this is a really, in a 50-50 country where the Democrats vote against virtually anything that President Trump does. They had all of the Democrats voted to confirm Marco Rubio. Now, there was one person absent, but it was 99 senators out of 100 with one absent. So 99-0 to confirm Marco Rubio. So he's got real popular support behind him.
But I mean, what do you think that will actually mean for how national security is managed and ultimately the safety of Americans around the world? I mean, it is very hard, isn't it, to combine the two jobs, because the Secretary of State has to travel all the time, whilst the National Security Advisor has to sit in the West Wing and be at the beck and call of the president.
Without a doubt, it's a great question, Charles, and a great thought. And that's why, again, this is meant to be temporary. I think they'll probably appoint a permanent NSA director very quickly. There's a few names that have been bantered around, two of which have had experience in the White House in Trump's first term. Robert O'Brien and Rick Grenell, both have very high level experience. In fact, Robert O'Brien was National Security Advisor for the last 2 years of the president's first term. So no, there'll be a quick replacement. I imagine Senate confirmation will come quickly. If it's Robert O'Brien, there might be some pushback against Rick Grenell because the Democrats don't tend to like people that are aggressive in nature and putting America first and all the other sort of President Trump's campaign messages. But I don't think there's any barriers to getting a replacement quickly.
And of course, Mike Waltz has lasted just under 100 days or so as the National Security Advisor, but he's beaten Mike Flynn, who was Donald Trump's first National Advisor in his first term, and he lasted just 22 days. Are we seeing far less churn this time around than in the first Trump administration? If so, what does that tell us about Trump, what he's like now compared to 2016? And you can sort of give us the optimistic spin, if you like.
Well, I don't even have to spin it. I mean, the reality is the president is much better organized this time. The team he's put together is much more committed to his campaign messaging and really his philosophy. So I think that, it's a much more organized group. But I would point out that Mike Flynn wasn't fired because of some disagreement with the president. He was basically attacked by the press, by the Democrats, and implicated in that big Russia collusion hoax, and his life was almost ruined by the left and the Democrats turned out to be completely untrue. As with the rest of the Russia collusion hoax, it was basically orchestrated by the Hillary Clinton campaign with some collusion from the FBI and the CIA. So that Mike Flynn it's a really sad story. I would love to see him come back, if anything, just for some payback. Not payback's the wrong word, but just vindication, more importantly. And so we'll see. But no, I don't expect to see the kind of churn that we saw in the first term at all. So it's a really good point you brought up, Charles.
Right. So Mr. Trump, certainly to very sort of down the middle analysts like yourself, appearing to be more gracious this second time around. I mean, do you think he's more organized as well, or you wouldn't go that far? Because, I mean, having taken the decision, for example, to move Mr. Waltz, he announced the decision on social media, which meant that at a press conference, State Department spokeswoman Tammy Bruce was told the news by the assembled journalists. I mean, that was pretty bizarre, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think when you're a disruptive president, when you're provocative, when you're unorthodox, you tend to do things differently. And yeah, I think in the old days, you would have had a proper communication with all the right people. The president's really transparent. I mean, this might be the most transparent White House we've ever had. And so he tends to just, speak directly to the people, which is, again, one of the reasons he was elected, because people really like that. The voters like that. And he's going to be mistreated by the media. So he has to go directly to the people. I just saw a poll recently in the last week that the coverage of President Trump since his inauguration has been 92% negative by the corporate media, the legacy media here in the US. And so that's a really tough challenge for a president to fight a hostile media like that. So, I mean, I'm all for media being hostile, and they should be investigating. They should be pushing the envelope and making politicians accountable. But they basically gave Joe Biden a pass for 4 years. They did not investigate anything about his cognitive issues. It's making one of the reasons the press in America is at all-time low ratings in terms of trust by the public. So the president has no choice but to go right to the people because of the hostile media. And if that means he's going to skip a phase or skip a step in terms of communicating with people in state or people in other departments, that's probably one of the unfortunate outcomes of the unfairness on the left and from the media.
Well, finally, Greg, I mean, when you keep in mind that the 3 national security advisors in Mr. Trump's first term were fired without nary a handshake, I mean, would you say that Mike Waltz is getting a pretty good deal, even though we all know that the Trump administration doesn't think very highly of the UN?
Right. I think he is getting a good deal because, Nikki Haley, in spite of her potential differences with President Trump, Nikki Haley did a great job. She really she fought back against some of the real absurd policy maneuvers that occur at the UN. And so I think he'll do a really great job. He's a patriot. He's the first Green Beret to ever have that position. Might be the first Green Beret to have any cabinet position. I'm not sure of that, but I know for sure he was the first Green Beret as National Security Advisor. He has got an excellent track record. He was a fantastic congressman from Florida. So I'm glad he's sticking around. I think that's great. And as I pointed out earlier, Mike Flynn wasn't really fired. He was forced out where he could no longer continue in the role given the hostility and the Russia collusion hoax that was created around him. And then, of course, John Bolton, as famously not a particular fan of President Trump anymore. That was not a great relationship in the first place. And then, of course, Robert O'Brien finished up in the last 2 years and still has a fantastic relationship with the president. So I think, all good. Things will work out. It's much better. There's much more consistency in this president's second term. And I think that's refreshing.
Greg, thanks very much indeed. We really appreciate the time you've taken to talk to us. Greg Swenson is the Republican strategist and chair of Republicans Overseas UK, and he was talking to me on the line from Chicago.